It's 5 of. Oscar, do you have enough music to play with us for a few minutes?
I'm recording as well.
I could play some things right now, yes.
Okay, we need to go, and we begin with greetings and announcements. Again, we want to thank you all for showing up for the special meeting of the congregation. For those of you who are just joining in, we did vote to go virtual most of the time, and we'll meet face-to-face when it is safe. We also voted to go with a new revised budget, and Oscar is our, hold your prayers now, Minister of Music. We're glad to have Jay back with us. Jay, as we pointed out before, and his band have done extraordinarily well, but they've been hit by by all the closings as well. So he's had some time to be with us this morning as well. We light the memorial candle, and let me light this, and you can read along with me if you wish. We light this memorial candle to celebrate those who have taken on the task of nurturing a young one, baby, child, or youth. They've nurtured them into adulthood. To celebrate those who have nourished the light of truth and compassion in growing minds and hearts. To celebrate those who have committed time, money, and energy to the growth of others in this world. We light this memorial candle to celebrate and hold dear this flame of love. We'll now have an introit, and you've heard this before. This is Hindu Arati. Margarita, let's unmute everybody to see how we try reading this together today. Our call to worship is a responsive call to worship. I will read in one part and ask you to read the indented part. We come together today in praise and thanksgiving for the gift of life itself. Someone gave birth to us,
and some of us have given birth.
I'll just say I've never done Zoom before. I don't know how to use it.
all of us have been mothered in our time.
All of us have mothered.
All that life is made of a parent is made of two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
They
they
sing
sing
the
the
songs
songs
of
of
so
so
many.
many.
Mothers, fathers, or single parents, foster parents, mothers, fathers who relinquish their young out of necessity. Mothers
Their
Fathers
found their
found their
heart
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 in adoption.
adoption.
Mothers, fathers who left their children in 1,000 ways.
Mothers,
Mothers, fathers,
who rejoice.
rejoice.
Mothers,
Mothers,
fathers,
fathers who mourn.
and all of us together.
we
also
Also
sing
sing the
songs
songs of the grandmother, grandfather, the auntie, the uncle, the classroom teacher,
the
the
religious
religious
exploration
exploration teacher,
the baby,
babysitter,
even
the
the
nurturing neighbor. And let us read the morning prayer together for those who wish.
may the
May the
divine
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 within us
within us and around us
move us to continually support
moms and dads, family, members,
members.
the
Journey of growth and love
all be responsible towards each other,
environment, creatures,
great and
great
small.
Great and small.
I have to make something that bricks of,
You would now play. Jay, welcome back.
Hi. Can you guys hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Okay. I put in some headphones, so maybe the quality might be a little better. Do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, let's try this again. Her day starts with a coffee and ends with a wine. Takes forever getting ready. She's never on time for anything. When she gets that come get me look in her eyes, well, it kind of scares me the way that she drives me wild. She drives me wild. Beautiful, crazy, she can't help but amaze me. The way that she dances, ain't afraid to take chances, and wears her heart on her sleeve. Yeah, she's crazy, but her crazy's beautiful to me. She makes plans for the weekend, can't wait to go out. She changes her mindset, stay on the couch and watch TV. She falls asleep. Beautiful, crazy, she can't help but amaze me. The way that she dances, ain't afraid to take chances, and wears her heart on her sleeve. Yeah, she's crazy, but her crazy's beautiful to me. So predictable, unforgettable. It's unusual, unbelievable. How I'm such a fool. Yeah, I'm such a fool for her. Beautiful, crazy, she can't help but amaze me. The way that she dances, ain't afraid to take chances, and wears her heart on her sleeve. Yeah, she's crazy, she's crazy, oh, she's crazy, but her crazy's beautiful to me. The crazy's beautiful to me.
All right, Jay, thank you very, very, very much. The first reading today is a reading that I remember, oddly enough, from my first year in college. And I don't know why I remembered it. And then today it cropped up because it's going to be one of the themes for sharing later on. I don't even remember Shelley. If I remember correctly, his wife was the one who wrote Frankenstein. And let me read you this poem. If you want to talk about how we think we're powerful, here you go. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk with a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well knew those passions red which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing besides remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So much for power. A responsive reading for those of you who wish, and will remain muted again. I will read the first part, and if you would read the second. Blessed is the person who feeds and warms and washes and comforts the child and soothes them in illness, for they shall be called caregiver. Blessed is the person who gives shelter and food, clothing, toys, books, and tools, for they shall be called provider. Blessed is the person who opens doors in the child's experience, who explains the puzzling and wonders at the mysteries, for they shall be called teachers. Blessed is the person who shields a child from that which will wither or warp, who protects a child from abuse and exploitation, who guards against bullying and scorn, for they shall be called defender. Blessed is the person who takes the time to listen, who is there for a child in the darkness, who is aware of the fears, who speaks the words of encouragement in moments of despair, for they shall be called sustainer. Blessed is the person who guides a child in the search for beauty, who encourages them at what is daunting, who steadies them as they explore new experiences, who fires their aspirations and their dreams, for they shall be called inspired. Blessed are all these persons who will bring an infant along the many paths to maturity, for in them is the future and well-being of humanity. The next reading is also to do with power. Oftentimes in Christianity, we hear about the power and triumphalness of institutions. It has always been amazing that people who are all about power seem to forget that Jesus himself was not about power temporal. It wasn't about wielding swords and chasing off and beating everybody and being Ozymandias, powerful in terms of hurt, lording it over, commanding. It's interesting that when Jesus was speaking about what he thought, where power really is revealed, this is what he chose from the prophet whom we now call third Isaiah. Who has believed what we have heard, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering, acquainted with infirmity, and as one from whom others hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him of no account. History will look back and find that many in Jesus' time would say that appeared to him. And notice who he went to in all that power. the poor, the unfortunate, the sick, and the suffering. That to him is what power is about. The poor, the unfortunate, caring unto others as we would care unto ourselves. Jay, if Wow, Jay, I didn't know your voice had such range. Thank you. Thank you. Let us have a moment of silence. Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, our steps directed towards you. Amen. Well, I was not paying attention to the calendar, so this is a kind of a prequel to be before all of this. I was doing a trilogy. One was on grief, the second part was going to be on power, and the last part was going to be on hope. So I didn't realize the day was Mother's Day. So I'm going to try to pull off the impossible. On one hand, talking about mothers and families, and then I'm going to transfer over into power and powerlessness. And this may work wonderfully, and it may be a magnificent disaster right in front of your very eyes. Let's go. Mother's Day, I had to remind myself, was started by a peacenik, somebody who was really into peace and activism. Her name was Anne Reeves Jarvis. She took care of the wounded in the Civil War on both sides. And after the war, she was concerned about how you bring people together and how you care, and for all the people who were grieving on both sides. To keep alive this rather unique approach in 1865, in 1864, and 1866, after she died, her daughter Anna Jarvis wanted to keep alive the idea of caring on both sides and how you take care of people. She finally got an idea of Mother's Day for caring on both sides and for mothers who have to care and nurture. It was a very broad idea. And the idea was to be nurturing and caring. In 1911, it became part of the United States. However, very soon it became commercialized. I don't know what it is about us in this country. If you can make money, by all means, make money. Anna was absolutely livid at how commercialized Mother's Day became, and it got so far off from what her originally mother wanted to do, was how do you nurture and care for everybody. And then, of course, as we got going into after World War II, Mother's Day became the very big thing in the 1950s. The next thing you know, without realizing it, we began to shame anybody who wasn't a birth mother who was married. Many of you are very, very young. I grew up watching such things as Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if anybody remembers that. The Ozzie and Harriet show. And I'm missing one other one. The idea was everybody was married. You had 2 or 3 kids, a picket fence, and all the rest of that stuff. And this was the idealized. Of course, everybody was doing this. And what we wound up doing was shaming everybody else that wasn't involved in this kind of life. And so rather than Mother's Day, for instance, being a time to celebrate family, celebrate all kinds of nurturing and all kinds of families, it became a shame all unless you were married and had a certain income and could provide for 2 or 3 point kids with a picket fence, 2 dogs, and everything else. And so it's then an attempt on many of us to say, all right, how do we rectify what was originally a really good idea and really turned into a shame fest? And let's not forget benign neglect of dads. You notice how Mother's Day and Father's Day ultimately got thrown in June, but nobody ever remembered that. Oh yeah, we have Father's Day, as if like, they don't count. In my way of thinking, it became a mess all the way around the way. So I wanted to say maybe what we need today is have a Mother's Day, a Dad's Day, a family day all in one. But if you're going to talk about family, then we need to be honest. And I happen to make a list here, one of my famous lists, of who we would have to really include if we're going to be honest. Not the Hollywood or the Hallmark, whatever it's going to be, but let's talk about the way it is. The kind of people, for instance, I have ministered to throughout my entire career. This is the real world. We get moms that give birth who are married. We give moms who give birth who aren't married. And let's point out, by the way, that moms giving birth who aren't married have been around like since the beginning. This is not like something that creeped up in the Victorian era. Oh, my heavens, what happened? Then there are moms who can't marry, who can't give birth for a variety of reasons, but they are nurturing and caring anyway. There are moms who adopt. There are moms who choose not to give birth for a variety of reasons, but that doesn't mean they can't nurture and they don't nurture. Of course they do. There are dads that are married, dads that are not married. There are dads who adopt, moms and dads who are single parents. They're gay and lesbian parents. They're foster parents. I'm getting going here, folks. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg. What about grandmothers? When the kids go south or something happens, who takes over the kids? There was a huge thing I remember years ago about talking about when a lot of kids were on drugs and were simply incapable of taking. You got 70 and 75-year-old grandmothers and grandfathers who had their own physical ailments raising 5 and 6-year-olds. It was a huge, huge issue. Now with meth and everything else back, you know, we forget, once you leave the city, there is a huge epidemic of meth in this country and other drugs who are leaving kids that are 5 and 6 and 7 without parents. And who do you think is stepping in? Grandparents. Big role. They never get mentioned. Grandfathers. What about aunts and uncles? Who can ever forget great aunts and uncles? Somebody has an aunt or uncle someplace that has been a hoot. You know, the one who kind of colors, I love what Gail said, somebody who colors outside the lines. It brings kids joy and all kinds of stuff. You can't wait to see this certain aunt or certain uncle. Cousins. There are all kinds of crazy cousins. I haven't gotten finished yet. What about the working mom? What about the working dad who are trying to, or whether they're married or not, who are trying to raise kids at the same time, but they have to work, oftentimes 2 jobs. Miami-Dade County is a classic example. We've got 40% of people's income going to pay the mortgage or rent in this county alone. The poverty rate in Miami-Dade County is 25%. You have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make, and then you get people who get mad about, we can't raise the hourly rate. I always get annoyed, by the way, that the people who say you can't raise the hourly rate are making $100,000 plus. It really has always fascinated me. Oh, but why is this a problem to you? We've got stay-at-home moms who oftentimes feel embarrassed to say they stay at home. Now, that's not right either. You stay at home, you're raising kids. And by the way, I don't know if any of you had to stay home and raise kids, but I remember when my 2 daughters were young, I had them every other weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I was the full-time mom. This is a great way to go insane. I remember that there was a new show called The Muppets that came on. And I thanked God, lit candles for the Muppets to give me rest for an hour as the Muppets came on. If any of you have ever stayed home and you've had the kids in your hair all the time, nap time. Nap time is one of the great things for little kids. Nap time and the Muppets. Am I making anybody, have you done this? Yeah, so, you know, when people say, oh, you're a stay-home mom, that can be like wild. You ought to try being around a couple of kids 24 hours day in and day out. When is your time? When is your time for you? What about step-parents? Step-parents make up a big deal in this country. A lot of step-parents. We never seem to take time to thank them. Our daughter's husband has been with her children for a long time now. He does an excellent job. Nobody ever says thank you to him. Nobody ever says thank you, you've done a great job. I'm thinking of all the stepdads and stepmoms out there. Who says thank you? Who says, yo, you know, you've done a good job? What about those kids who are in the way? And I mentioned Mark. What about his mom who worries about Mark being in the hospital? Right now, all those moms who have people on the front line in the hospitals as nurses or doctors. Oh, here's another one. What about those moms right now and those dads whose kids are collecting the garbage, who are being janitors, who are doing the kind of work that puts them on the front line, and, you know, they're exposed to everything, and we never mention them either. And I noticed just now that a lot of the magazines and stuff are showing pictures of people out there in the real world who are having to put all this stuff together. What about the parents? So we say moms and dads and families, the idea of, you know, the 2-point kids, the picket fence, the dog, and that's one kind of family. But I just read off a list of all kinds of variations of families. And that's the way it is in the real world. And I suspect, if we're going to be really honest, it's been that way for a very, very long time. Now, the answer to the obvious thing to this, that means that the mothering and fathering and nurturing and being grandparents and being aunts and uncles is messy. I you know, just leave it to Beaver. Did you ever see The Messes? People forget that. Ozzie and Harriet, The Messes. Life, folks, is messy. You know that. I was taught in the beginning, everything was painted that life was this way or that way. You and I know life is messy. And that means, if you're going to be honest, as I make a pivot, there's not much power and control over what we do. Everybody here's had kids that disappoint them, or kids have had parents that disappoint them. Am I right? Nobody ever does it right 100% of the time, all the time. Are we clear about that? Life is messy and there's disappointments all over the place. That's the way it is. We get to this point, by the way, in my classes about free will. Zoroaster, oddly enough, was about the first one to talk about free will. Especially in the United States, we like to have how free we are. Well, I've got some questions for you. Just how free are we? And I remember talking about this with my classes. And here we go. Let me ask you some questions. When you were born, let's talk about lack of freedom. Did any of you have any say about the color of your hair? No. Did any of you have any say about the texture of your hair? Did anybody here have a say when you were born about the color of your skin? No. Did anybody here have any say about the class into which you were born? Did anybody here have any say about the neighborhood in which you were going to be nurtured as you were 2 and 3 and 4? Did any of you have any say about your parents? No. Did any of you have any say about your genetics? What things that you carry with you from your collective ancestry that drive everybody else nuts? You know, you have things that are you, and they're saying they're just you, but you are the collective thing. And did you have a chance when you were born to go back and say, yo, I don't want your genes, I don't want your genes. Oh, this I like. No, nobody had anything to say about that. Did anybody have any chance about predispositions? When you get down to it, when we're born, we don't have a lot going that we're free about. And that's the kinds of thing most people don't. We don't have that much power. People like to say, I'm powerful. I got a lot of power. Oh, really? You didn't have a lot of power when you started. You didn't have a lot of power about your race, your income, your neighborhood, the color of your skin. You didn't have any power about that whatsoever. And that means when you go off into the world thinking you're really powerful, in fact, you're already had that diminished by all kinds of things about which you had no say. There are other things that limit our power too, not only what our families bring into it. Here's some other things. We don't have any power about other people's actions. I've mentioned this in shares before because it's one of those things I've never forgotten. And you've heard me mention this before about that guy down on Old Cutler Road who was changing a tire. I called his best friend. Remember, I mentioned that before. I called his best friend. They're changing a tire. The guy ran through a stoplight right there in front of the Presbyterian church and hit them both and killed them both. And he was so drunk, he didn't remember even doing that till the cops pulled him over on the side of the road when he was almost passed out in his car. Killed 2 very innocent people. We have no say over other people's actions. I have down here weather. Do we have any say about the weather? Oh yes, we had no say about friends of mine in my former congregation in Pennsylvania who texted me, it's 40 degrees and snowing. Sorry. And Carol Ryder was saying it was 42 and snowing. And we didn't have any say about that. But then they can point out to us, Claus, it's hurricane season. Oh, yes. How many of us have lived through hurricanes? The first hurricane I experienced was, I'm showing my age here, 1962. Gail, you may remember this. March 1962. Yes, she raises her hand. I get up to go to high school. I look out my window, ready for this. The water is coming up the driveway. I lived on an island. Gail, I lived on Brigantine Island. The water is coming up the driveway. I go to the back bathroom. There is no bulkhead. The bay is in our backyard. That means that the ocean and the bay are meeting 1 block from my house, which means the island is underwater. Turns out we had a freak storm and a mini hurricane at 2 o'clock in the morning that none of our weather people predicted. It was a perfect storm. Yes, hurricanes. You live down here, you know, hurricanes happen. They're delightful. It's interesting to see how birds' nests survive and everything else goes south. We have some hawks over here, and every time there's a hurricane, their hawk's nest is the only thing that does fine. Thank you very much. Everything else is blown to smithereens. That stupid nest is up there where we walk the dogs just fine. Thank you very much. We have no say about disease. Nobody wakes up and says, oh, you know what I want today? I want to get really a bad flu. Nobody wakes up and says, what I need is a good stomach virus. Nobody wants to go into office and see half the people you're working in an office sneezing all over the place. I mean, we have no say about disease. And we have no say about death. We really, really don't. So when you start looking at what power we have, you know, the reality is we don't have much power. We don't have power about who our parents are. We don't have much to say about our siblings. I have often asked my sisters, if you have siblings you like to put in the microwave? Yes, all kinds of hands go up. I said, well, you're not doing that. I mean, we have no say about a lot of this stuff. We have in our families, and we have no say about who we are, where we came from. And so even when we make choices, we bring with us all that genetics, all of our family, whether we like it or not. We bring all this stuff to the table. While we think we're being very powerful in all this, in fact, we're reflecting a lot of stuff we picked up along the way and we forget. So I have some thoughts about families and power and all this stuff about the orange ones screaming about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, trying to reflect power. Let me suggest a couple of things. Number one, I think we need to be honest. And we need to stop being in denial of how little power most of us have. You need to be honest about that. There's a famous thing in rehab, denial is not a river in Egypt. We seem to, all of us, be in denial. We seem to think we're bigger and better than we are. It seems to be a problem with our species. It's not just individuals. It seems to be a species thing. This poem was from Psalm 8. I read this to you because this thing really annoys me. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Now, this is what I really find annoying. The author writes, you have made them a little lower than God. Really? I certainly hope not. You have made human beings a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. What I see, if this is the work of God, then all the rollbacks for conservation, all the fighting about climate control, oh, please don't even go there. We aren't a little lower than God. We have, as a species, lots of issues. And one of the issues is being denial about the fact that we are not all powerful, and power for us seems to radiate being in charge of, lording it over, having more money, having more this, having more, that's power. Yet, the value, number two, of every religion has been our power comes not from having money, not from having the best things. Our power does not come from class or color. It does not come from telling everybody what to do. That's fake power. That's power that's elusive. But the real power comes from within. And how you link the power within you to all of that that's around you that can be good and affirming. Notice that when Jesus refers to what is important, he refers to the suffering servant. He has the famous thing, when you did it to the least of these, you did it also to me. Power comes from seeing that which is kind and compassionate. When you love your neighbor as yourself, when you get a sense of that which is within and you link it with that which is without. The problem is, I think, twofold. We're in denial about what really makes us whole and real. And number two, we block. And I think we're all guilty of this, everybody. We have too much to do. One of the nice things about the coronavirus, if there's some nice things to be had, is a lot of us have to sit and remind ourselves who we really are. A lot of us have been home. That means we can't lose ourselves in busyness. Busy, busy, busy. We have to sit home. We have to find out who we are. We have to discover, are we in touch with each other? Do we really understand who we are? What have we lost? How do we recover who we really are? Or maybe we have something taken for granted. I said to Maria Teresa last week, I put my hands on her shoulders and said, it's a good thing we really like each other. I mean, can you imagine? We were stuck in the house. And I said, I put my hands, it's a good thing we like each other. So who are we? How do we discover who we are again? The power comes is not all this artificial stuff, but how do we learn to transform each and every one of us into a loving, kind, and caring person? How do we learn to love ourselves and love others? Every one of the great religions talks about the divine within and the divine without. Hinduism started it, oddly enough, saying there was an Atman within and a Brahman without. How do you link the divine within and the divine without? Jesus repeated this, not because it was Hindu, but you have it in the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Luke. The Pharisees said, "Where's the kingdom of God?" And Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you and around you." We're so busy, so doing, we've forgotten within and all the stuff around us. Melissa has a garden, and she gardens. She's out there doing gardening work. Some of you have been able to hear birds for the first time. Yeah, we actually have birds here, believe it or not. Some of you have discovered the deep, deep friendship you have with a person you're married to. A deep friendship. Some of you have discovered that being alone discovers resources that you never thought you had. So I would suggest that as we celebrate families and all the mess that is, and we celebrate all this kind of day and all the messiness, we also take time to rediscover in all of this, there is great stuff within and great stuff without. Let us readmit, reaffirm, refine, become in touch again with the inner me, the outer you, and become whole and well. Amen. A song, Spirit of Life.
Good morning. I'm Fred Jodrey, the music director here at First Unitarian. Today we're going to sing Spirit of Life. I'll play it through once, and then we'll show you the words and the music so you can sing along if you feel inspired.
We continue as we always gather, and if those of you at home wish to do this at home, if you have some bread, we remember that Jesus invoked a very, very ancient tradition. Bread, they now argue, has been around in some type or form at least since maybe 11,000 BCE in certain types of grains. And from the very beginning, when people started making bread, they took bread and offered it to their visitors and to their family. Jesus took bread often. People in Christianity often refer to the Last Supper, but other scholars are saying what we need to concentrate on are the suppers he had with all sorts and conditions throughout his ministry. Taking bread, blessing and breaking it, as you always do, taking a cup, filling it, and offering bread and cup. And so we offer this bread and this cup each time we gather. And if you have bread, take it now. And remember, you are linking yourself with us and everyone here. Bread of blessing, a cup of blessing. May peace be upon us. Amen. Ah, yes, the black chip. You thought when we went virtual, we might get away with this, not having to come up with this. Oh, no, 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 no. This is staying with us. For those of you who are not used to this, we stole this. I'd like to say we borrowed it. We did. We stole this from NA and AA. The idea is if you're ticked off with something and something's really bothering you, before you really leave this congregation, you need to take a chip with you to remind you that part of our faith goes with us wherever we are, and that means we need to work on things that block us. So here is a black chip. I've got to find ways to get these to you. Oh, maybe that's what we ought to do. I need to talk to Judy about this. If you want us to mail you a black chip, maybe we ought to, oh, that's what we ought to do. Mail you a black chip. If there's something you need to work on, you can hold it up. Does that work for everybody? That's an interesting idea. Hold up your black chip if you need something to work on. Let me know what you think about that. Our concluding prayer before we have a final song. May the blessings of God be upon us in this hour and in the days to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we may think more independently, that we may reflect more searchingly, that we may know ourselves more completely, that we may forgive more quickly, we may pray more thoughtfully, we may act more courageously, we may live more nobly. And if you would, Oscar, introduce us to this classic last song.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
A little louder?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, you can hear me? How about, you can hear this? Can you hear that? Okay, so this song goes back to 1939. It was a song that soldiers would sing amongst themselves when they missed home and they just had the faith that they would come back. And Vera Lynn has this iconic recording. There have been others, but this is like the most iconic recording. The words are in the back. The melody is, and Jay, I'm not a singer like you, so when you said God help us, here we are. We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the And then the middle section. Now, if we all know it, we can just go ahead and sing it. You know, and I can just go ahead and play it, or do I finish it? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Go, yeah, everybody's muted. Go ahead and
And go through it. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
go
Let's
for
do
it.
it. Okay,
Let's do
here
it.
we go. From the top. Here we go.
everyone's muted.
So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? I'll be happy
Oscar, one more time. One more time.
One more time.
Yes. Come on now, everybody. Let's try one more time. We're back to 1939.
I don't know when.
2, 3, and. That sounded beautiful. I heard everybody singing. Thank you.
Lord have
Great
mercy.
job.
Our final blessing, and then I suggest after the blessing, we take a moment to say hello to everybody before we scoot away. All right, the final blessing. This is a mixing of an old Irish, blessing, and we added a Hindu thought to it as well. So we blended both, as we often do here.
Yeah.
May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always.
Roast waffles.
May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, may the divine in me greet the divine in you. Amen.
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 Do say hello to one another before